Hello, thanks for joining me. So I haven't made a video in quite a while, but I got two ideas for videos that I thought I would make. I have to say the first idea is maybe a little bit self-focused in that I'm actually going to talk about my own chart, my own astrology chart, but I will try to sort of make it somewhat interesting or helpful for other people. But it's really a way for me to get back into making videos, and I find that it's quite easy in a way to talk about your own experiences, especially like when it comes to your natal chart, because you have lived experience with that. So it's just something to kind of get me into making videos. But then I will make up for the self-centered video by making a kind of a second video at some point, either today or in the coming days, that will be about, well, it will be kind of like a question and answer thing. So I thought up some questions that people might be curious about when it comes to astrology, or even some of my thoughts about astrology and just in general questions that people might have about astrology. So then I will kind of do like this kind of, I will kind of answer my own questions that I came up with. And what's also making this somewhat interesting for me is that this is my first video in my new apartment. So yeah, there's that. So I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of things about my chart, but I did think of a few things that I thought were maybe things that I might say if somebody were to ask me, like, what's interesting about your chart, or what's unusual about your chart? What are some of the quirky things about your chart, right? So the first thing I'm going to talk about is, well, I don't have a whole lot of knowledge about this, to be honest, but I thought I would talk about that in my chart. I have one retrograde planet, which is Pluto. I'm not actually 100% sure, but I think about 50% of people have Pluto retrograde. But I want to talk about that I do have Jupiter stationing direct in my chart. So, for example, if I look on astro.com on my chart, it will have like this D, which means that it's not quite direct, but it's kind of coming back from retrograde, right? It's stationing direct from retrograde. And I thought that was interesting because I have tried looking up information about Jupiter state, or any planet stationing direct or stationing retrograde in a chart, and what that might mean. But there isn't a whole lot of information that I've been able to find. But I think with Jupiter stationing direct, for example, with Jupiter retrograde, it would certainly be related to somebody needing to maybe refine or define or renew some of their beliefs, or some of their maybe some of their philosophical ideas, or their intellectual ideas. Maybe it could even be somebody has a theme in their life where they need to refine their ideas, refine their beliefs about something. I certainly relate to this, even though I don't have, like, mine is stationing direct. But I think there's been a lot of times that people have told me that, like, you need to challenge your own beliefs more, right? Because our beliefs color our reality, and in some ways Jupiter has to do with beliefs, but it also has to do with sort of reality, like our perception of reality and what we think of reality, what we make of reality. So if Mercury is sort of picking up information about reality, Jupiter is adding meaning to it. It's adding another layer to it. It's like the higher octave of Mercury, right? So it's actively trying to put meaning and ideas on existing ideas, if that makes sense. So putting meaning on ideas, putting meaning on what's going on with this information that we're taking in, right? So that's maybe a theme in my life, although I don't feel it super strongly. I haven't thought about this placement that much, but I thought it was interesting when I think about that I don't really have retrograde planets a lot in my chart. I mean, I have Pluto retrograde. I don't have any personal planets retrograde. I don't have like Mercury retrograde or Venus retrograde or anything like that in my chart. But Jupiter is stationing direct. So I thought that was like an unusual piece in my chart. There's a dog making sounds outside. So if you hear loud noises, that's what that is. Can't help that. Sorry. So another thing I wanted to talk about is I've thought about this one a bit more, and I don't want to make this video too long. I might actually have to make it into two parts. I'm not really sure. We'll see how we go. I improvise a lot. I have Mars at 29 degrees of Gemini. So it's the only planet that I have that is at 29 degrees, which is the last degree. I don't have any planets at 0 degrees. 0 degrees would be like the beginning of that sign, maybe your soul, so to speak. if you want to talk in those terms, sometimes I like to. Your soul, at 0 degrees, your soul is sort of taking on this new clothing, let's say. So it's just getting used to this sign, if that makes sense. But 29 degrees is the last degree, so it's kind of like you are really needing at this point, at this lifetime, to really learn these lessons before you go on. So it's something that's very critical. It's a critical degree. And for my Mars in Gemini, it definitely feels critical, because Mars in Gemini can be very unfocused, a bit scatterbrained, not really sure which direction to take when it comes to projects. That sounds like ADHD as well, which I don't know if I have ADHD. I might have ADHD, or I might be a little bit on the ADHD spectrum, if you want to say that. But I don't know. I wouldn't say I have it like super strongly in any case. I don't know. But let's not talk about that right now. But I think Mars in Gemini is almost like an ADHD position in the sense that like the energy is so scattered that you might start all these projects and like you have all these ideas and you get excited about something. And I read this on Cafe Astrology, I think, that if there's a lot of interesting things to do, you can be a powerhouse. But if you're bored, if there's not a lot to do, then you're exhausted and weary and like worn out. That is so much me, especially when I was younger. So I think Mars at 29 degrees Gemini is something that is like a critical thing in my life. It's at a critical degree. So it's a very strong influence. It's something that I really need to learn, and it's like I need to tie up these loose ends and really learn how to focus and learn how to actually take the information that I receive, which is Gemini, kind of. It's, you know, I receive a lot of information. I'm Mars and Gemini, and then but try to make it more focused, try to make it more refined. So I've talked about this before on some old videos. I'm not sure if they're still up on my channel, but yeah, I don't think they're up on my channel right now. But I have a kind of what I would call an irregular grand cross. So a grand cross is when you have 2 oppositions and 4 squares, and they're kind of making this cross. And it's about sort of, you have 4 parts of your psychology or 4 parts of your life very much at odds in a way. Like they're trying to work together, but it's hard. So it's like you have 4 different issues that going on at all times, and they're all kind of related to each other, they're all bouncing off each other, right? That has been to some degree a theme in my life, even though my grand cross is pretty irregular in the sense that they're not all in the same modality. So I'm sure there are astrologers that wouldn't even consider that a grand cross. I feel the energy of it myself, but I can imagine that there are people that have like really strong grand crosses that are where all the same modality is present. What I mean by that is, like, I have Mercury in Aries, I have Moon in Scorpio, I have Jupiter in Leo, and I have Saturn in Aquarius. So my Jupiter and Saturn are in opposition, and they're both squaring my Moon. But I also kind of have Moon and Mercury in an opposition, even though they're not in opposite signs. But degree-wise, they're in a weak opposition. They're in a little bit of an opposition, and so those are both square Mercury as well. I hope I said that correctly. So yeah, anyway, like my Moon and Mercury are opposite, my Jupiter and Saturn are opposite, and my Jupiter and Saturn are both square both Moon and Mercury, right? And it's definitely a theme that I feel in my life, in that, you know, with the Grand Cross, there is always lessons that you have to learn, in the sense that, well, it's like, like I say, it's like there's 4 parts of you that are struggling, almost, and it's like situations in your life kind of come and go, that are very much to do with those 4 parts. So it's like it's reflected in your outside world, right? And when you have transits triggering very strongly these positions, then you will feel things even strong. You feel the Grand Cross even stronger, and you might have certain experiences that really trigger the Grand Cross, like transits that trigger the Grand Cross, where you have like a very critical time in your life. And I feel like with my Moon and Mercury being involved in this Grand Cross, or if you want to call it a Grand Cross, some people might not, because of they're in different modalities. Aries is like the odd one out here. Yes, because Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo are all fixed. Those are where the other 3 planets are, but then Mercury is in Aries, which is cardinal. But anyway, I think for me, because it's Moon and Mercury, it's very much my own inner word that is being challenged here, in the sense that like it's my moon is my emotions, my inner private self in a way. Mercury is my thoughts and my thinking and my communication, and my so I can get like, because like I have the Mercury Saturn connection, and Mercury Jupiter as well. It's like this kind of, I can go from being really optimistic and happy and kind of hopeful to being very like I need to like really ruminate and think about what I'm doing and really kind of take it down a notch. So it's like this kind of balancing that needs to be done. And same with my emotions, because my emotions are like the moon, and my moon is in Scorpio, which is very emotionally intense and up and down all the time, and kind of like very deeply emotional and just kind of up and down. And so because that is exaggerated because of it's square to Jupiter, but it's also in a square with Saturn, which are kind of opposites in a way, it's like, again, it needs to be balanced. The emotions need to be balanced, right? And I don't think I've seen any other chart with this kind of configuration where it's like Moon and Mercury are both square Jupiter and Saturn. Like, it's kind of creates this kind of unbalanced way of perceiving and way of reacting to things. Yeah, so I decided, partly also because my housemate is coming home soon, is that I'm going to make 2 videos about this topic. So I'm going to split it up into 2 videos, and then I will make the question and answer later in the coming days or whatever. So the last thing I want to talk about in this video is that another thing that might be interesting about my chart is that I have several quintiles and a biquintile. Now, I don't talk or think about these kinds of minor aspects that much, but quintiles are basically it's considered a minor aspect that is to do with creativity, personal expression, kind of a personal magnetism, maybe even magic or some kind of gifts, or like things that you're like super invested in or really passionate about, right? It's about like hyper focus almost in some sense, or it's kind of like what makes you like the 2 planets that are involved in a quintile. It's kind of like they're working in a way that is kind of quirky and makes you special in that area or in that way, right? So I have a quintile between Moon and Uranus and Moon and Neptune, and I think that's interesting because I think Uranus is sort of our eccentric side, our side of us that kind of has all these ideas and is quite creative in that way, and Neptune is also quite creative. It takes ideas from like almost like other realms. It can be quite refined, and I think Moon is our sort of our emotional self, right, and what we're emotionally connected to. And I think having Moon quintile Uranus and Neptune with me is kind of a representative, kind of like my Venus trine Neptune perhaps as well, of me loving sort of art and music, and I love going to the cinema. I love going to dance performances, stuff like that. I think it's like I'm emotionally connected to those artsy, creative, eccentric types of situations and people, and I have a bit of that myself, in that I need to express myself emotionally, or I tend to express myself emotionally in a way that is a bit like maybe a little bit quirky, like Moon Uranus, and then also can be quite theatrical the way that I express myself at times emotionally, Moon and Neptune. Yeah, like the quintiles and biquintiles. Biquintile is like a weaker quintile, right? But quintiles and biquintiles show that there's 2 planets, 2 parts of you that are interacting like a fun, quirky, sort of maybe slightly mysterious or magical way that like makes you quirky and stand out in that way, and makes you interesting in that way, right? Like, oh, that's interesting, that kind of thing. I also have what else? I have, well, this is strange because I don't really know how this is very significant in my chart or in my life. I have no idea how to interpret it really. Maybe if I think about it more, but I have a quintile between the North Node and my ascendant, but I'm not going to comment much on that because I don't know what it entails or why I have this. I haven't figured that one out yet. I also have, this is my last point in this video, like I have a biquintile between Mars and Saturn, which I think is interesting. I don't really know, again, how it manifests, what I can connect it with, because biquintile is also weaker than a regular quintile. It can be maybe something to do with self-control, or being meticulous in work, for example. I can be quite meticulous. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. And like I say, I will make a part 2 with other fun, interesting things about my chart. And I will do that question and answer video as well. So if you want more from me, do subscribe, leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this, leave a comment if you have similar placements and you want to talk about your experiences or whatever. And yeah, thank you.